Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming along to see us today. For those of you that aren't aware, this is the second in our series of MarkLogic Powering MDM events. If you're not able to attend the first session, don't worry. We do have recordings available. So if you want those, just drop your email in the chat directed to Phil Miller, and we'll get those sent out to you. For the technical amongst you, we also hope to have we've got a third event next week, and we'll put the registration details into the chat for that as well. Today's session is really going to focus on MarkLogic's data mastering toolbox and how to leverage the power of our data hub and the underlying database. We're thrilled to have a Q&A session with Pratik from Blue Meteor, as we always love to hear from customers, and we know that you guys like to hear from them too. And then today's final session will be from Sopra Steria. We've got Francois talking about the lessons that they've learned from implementing multiple projects in insurance and social protection industries. So I just wanted to start with a quick recap of some of the highlights from our first session, in case you missed it. We opened with a sort of high-level look at the underlying technologies in MarkLogic that help to solve many of the integration, agility, and complexity issues seen with traditional MDM solutions. Fred then showcased a sample app that we'd made to highlight how you can consume the data held in MarkLogic and utilize some of our key technologies for things like temporal access or semantic relationships. If you only have time to catch up on one session from last week, then I would suggest a presentation from Epcon and Vaudoise. They discussed their VIP platform and how it's the cornerstone of Vaudoise's digital transformation project. Jean-Francois covered their vendor selection process, the need for data governance, and their absolute requirement not to get lost in a long drawn-out ETL process and to remain agile to the changes that they happen to face. Their roadmap involves implementing an operational data hub before achieving their ultimate goal of making them a data-driven organization. And then finally, we heard from MuleSoft about how their technology serves as the perfect companion to MarkLogic for orchestration and integration. MuleSoft helps provide the APIs to integrate your upstream applications to feed correctly formatted data into the MDM solution, and additional APIs downstream to help consolidate data for your developers to interact with the platform. So if you didn't get a chance to watch last week's session or you missed something, the videos are now all available. So with that quick recap, I want to hand over to Frank Rubino, who's going to demonstrate the power of MarkLogic's data hub and some of our smart mastering capabilities. So over to you, Frank.
Unmute. Good morning, everyone. Really nice to see you. I'm going to start by talking. I'm going to show you a few slides in case you haven't seen enough. Let me share my screen here. Yeah, that looks good. So I'm going to focus a lot on mastering and on our mastering, one of the mastering tools that we provide as part of our data hub suite of tooling and frameworks. But what I want to start out with is really just talking about how the foundation of all this stuff is this MarkLogic data hub. And I'm not sure how many folks are familiar with this particular picture, but it is the meta pattern, I would call it, for what we do as a company, as a platform with data integration. And it's particularly tuned into our capabilities in the sense that the basic workflow is to take data from the left-hand side of this picture. That's just kind of going to be all of your data sources from your enterprise as is, pull them into the data hub, which is going to be represented as this kind of central stack of capabilities here, and curate it and deliver it out the right-hand side with your applications and with your APIs that want to provide this data to people who want to consume it. Now, we do a lot in the middle portion of this data hub, but one of the things that I really want to focus on is smart mastering, and that is the capability that MarkLogic has to exploit its indexes to be able to resolve data duplication issues and data quality issues, and also to provide an audit trail of metadata that shows how those resolutions occurred, and also provides a pathway back in case some regulatory situation forces you to undo the changes that you made while mastering. So before I get too far into the weeds, what I want to do is just set up a little quick demo and show this to you. So the first thing that I want to do is set the scene. This is a demo that we put together because we discovered that a lot of our customers across many different industries do have people data problems or data challenges, let's call them. In this sense, so in this case, we created an HR 360 use case, which is kind of a fictional use case, but I think you'll see that it may apply to some of your use cases. And it's about a fictional insurance company called Mountaintop Insurance that grows through acquisition. But you could also think of it as kind of a government agency that gets new missions and new teams, and has to integrate all that new information together to be able to align. In this case, we want to align job openings with the talent of the people in our HR database. And we need to be able to do that across all the data silos that start occurring as we get new companies, as we get new data sources online. So we want to be able to provide our HR department with this way of looking at the data that's not kind of scanning back and forth across all the screens. So what are we going to do? We're going to load this data as is into the data hub, and I'll show you a little bit about how to do all this with the data hub. And then we're going to curate it into this view that we're going to take all these sources, curate them into a unified view, and then while we're doing that, we're going to be modeling these key business objects or entities and the relationships between those objects that we want to query across as we provide our kind of holistic dashboard. And one of the things we're going to be having to do there is deal with the issue of duplicates. So I'm going to just start with my demo and switch into this application. So this is the I'm hoping my video is clear and good here. This is the so this is the landing page for our Data Hub Central Community Edition tool. And this is a tool that helps you build data hubs in kind of a no-code, low-code way. It focuses very much on visual, interactive data modeling. I'm going to log in here because MarkLogic, has security. And when I log in, I get to a data modeling screen. Let's close that. Okay. And my data modeling screen, I've already set up a data model here, which is very easy to do. This is kind of like a interactive canvas here where I can create new business entities, and just by interactively, clicking, and I can then add some properties to these new things, and I can go, and I can begin to build out a data model. I can also add relationships from things to other things. We'll call it as opening. And I might have many openings for my thing or whatever. So I can begin, you can see how you can begin to sort of build out a data model. And circles and lines here are for are a pretty easy metaphor for most people up and down the chain of MDM to be able to understand. So this is a process you might get into with your business stakeholders, for instance. Let me just delete that so I don't get bothered by it later. And so we can see here that, for instance, I've got this fully articulated employee entity where I've got a bunch of properties, like a first name and last name, and I'm going to have to bring in some data to map against this employee entity. The next thing I do is go over to my upload screen, and you can see here that I've got a bunch of data sources that I've uploaded. I'm gonna get rid of one of them and show you how that works here. So I guess just gotten rid of one of the data sources I've loaded. And here, now recall that we're talking about MarkLogic's multi-model capabilities, flexible data model. So what I've got here is I've got some source data for my HR data hub, and they exist here as flat files on the disk. You could also integrate this with other sort of data with other data movement kinds of architectures, like maybe you have Spark, or maybe you use MuleSoft, like we talked about last week, or one of those other tools. But here I'm just picking files from disk, and you'll notice I've just picked a bunch of JSON files. I've got other data on here for some of these other data sets, like I've got some CSV files, for instance, and I could take those in as well. But for now, I'm just going to pull these data files in just to show you how it works. And I'm going to call it Coastal Employees. Spell it right. Yeah. Okay. And when I save it, I'm going to get a little addition here to my table with my new data source in there. So now that I've got all my data loaded into my data hub from its as-is original sources, I want to go and I want to talk to you about how we integrate that. So I mentioned before that that we've created this data model, and we've done it sort of graphically and just the way it makes sense to think about the business problem, right? I have employees that have specialties, and we want to align them with job openings that have these particular focus areas. That's the logic of this. So when we integrate our data, let's pull in this. Well, before I even do that, let me head over to show you what we've already got integrated here. So let's get rid of this. Remember, I haven't pulled in that coastal employee data yet, but I do have some data in here. And you'll notice that it's circles and lines. It's a graph that looks kind of like the model that I had. And if I click on some of the nodes in this graph, you can see that I've pulled in some data that has attributes. I've got specialty areas that have job openings attached to them. I can page through this and look at it in a kind of a paged fashion. But what's more interesting here is that I want to use MarkLogic's powerful querying to be able to focus in on one particular employee who is looking for a new position in the company. So I've been told that Adriana Finn, I'm an HR specialist. I'm told that Adriana Finn is looking for a new role in the company. So let's take a look at Adriana Finn. So here's her personnel record. She's got this engineering resume, and she has a very good job review. She has this product skill set in general ledger. And remember I said that we can bring in all kinds of different data. I've even sort of brought in for Adriana, I brought in a photo. So we can even bring in binary information and tie them all together during this harmonization process that I'm about to show you. So, okay, so I'm finding out about Adriana Finn, but before I'm able to do anything to help Adriana, I have to integrate a whole new data set because we've just acquired the coastal insurance company. So how am I going to integrate that new coastal data? So I'm going to head back to my integrate tab here. And on here, you'll notice this, this kind of data pipeline, which is a familiar kind of model of the way that we think about a step-oriented data flow for automating these data transformations that we're going to do. So one of the things we're going to do here is we actually want to come over here and work from this page. We're gonna take a look at our employee mapping here. So what I've done here is I'm now into the part of working with data in MarkLogic that allows us to take an arbitrary data file that's come in, which is in any format, any schema, understand that schema, and then take that source schema and map it to a target schema. And we can do this incrementally without worrying about, changes to either one of those schemas, and still be able to find all the data and understand what we did to it. And the thing that we're looking at here is the interface that allows us to map all of that coastal employee data that I pulled in as JSON files into our new sort of employee canonical structure. And you'll see here that I have stuff like, I have to do things like, for instance, I have a target field that a property is called first name in camel case. It's the words all spelled out, nice and human readable. And I'm going to have to map this source property called F_name to first name. And that's fairly straightforward. You'll probably have seen that a lot of times in data mapping and things you have to do. Same with employee ID. Some of these things map straight over, like email. But in some cases, I have to do a little bit of data cleansing, data cleanup, or reformatting. For instance, here I've got to apply a function to the incoming competency structure that I'm going to be getting from my source data. And I have a menu of functions that I can apply that are built in here. And if I don't find one here that I need, that I can chain together to get the desired result, I can always write one and have it show up in this list. So let me get out of this. One of the other things you'll note also is, well, we're kind of lucky here in that our date worked, but often I think people find that as they're doing this kind of mapping, it's dates that really trip them up and that they really have to work with. Dates are never clean. Dates are never consistent. So anyway, so this is our mapping. This is really our mapping plan. And to run this mapping, what I'm going to do is just map it with this dialog. I hit a button, I hit a check mark, I click run, and I've now got 40 employees in my master set here. And when I go and explore Finn again, I've still got my view constrained to the Finn search term. I noticed that there's a second Finn, and this particular Finn has a coastal.com email address, and this Finn has a mountaintop.com email address. But they have the same physical address, and they have the same mobile phone number. If I scroll down here, 6665. And yeah, 6665, it's the same thing. I can sort of take a look here and see what has happened. what is the history of this particular fin entity that I've brought into my database and harmonized. I get this whole timeline of activities, and if I click on one of them, for instance, I can get some additional metadata about, for instance, the user who created this this initial fin document and where it came from, what its source data was. So this is a very powerful way of auditing your data as it goes through your master data management processes. And the other thing that it's very useful for is for merging these data. So let me show you how we do the interactive merging, because that's what I started out saying I would show you. So we took a little bit of a byway, but I think it was important to set the scene here. So we have two fins. We have two data sets with duplicate people in them. So we're going to start to set up our matching and merging sets, matching and merging processes, which are the core of MarkLogic Smart Mastering. So when I set up matching, I'm going to decide which properties in my records are important for me to consider as I decide which records are duplicates. And for instance, I've got this first name property. So I'm basically saying in this list of properties, which are the properties that I'm deciding are important, I care about the last name, the first name, and the mobile number. If I have those three properties aligning across records, I'm pretty sure that's the same person. But notice I say pretty sure. And that's an important aspect of smart mastering too, because we're not making absolute decisions. We're sort of saying we have confidence that these things are the same person. But in case our confidence betrays us and it turns out that these aren't the same people after all, we have all the metadata we need to go and recreate the initial scenario. So let me show you that in action, because that's kind of cool. So first of all, I've got the properties I care about. If I have a property that I care about, I'm basically going to say, how do I want to compare it? MarkLogic comes with a bunch of algorithms that can compare property values. And in this case, we're doing exact string matching, but we have a couple of other built-in ones, including one which I really love, which is double metaphone, which is the ability to make sort of phonetic comparisons across different entity properties. And yeah, so the exact string matching is the one we're gonna use here, and we're gonna say, okay, if my first name properties match exactly, I'm gonna assign a score to that, and the score that I'm gonna assign is 5. It's an arbitrary number that I come up with, and you'll see how those numbers factor into this in a second. I'm going to do the same thing with last name, where you notice I'm also doing an exact string match there, and mobile number an exact match. The last name and the mobile number I consider a little bit more important. The probability is higher if those two properties match, so I'm going to give them higher weights. They have higher scores. So if I match all three of these things, I'm going to come up with a final score of 25, 10, 10, 5, 25. To make life easy, I'm going to create a match threshold where I only care if all three of these match. Obviously, I could say, okay, I could do a 20, I could make a threshold of 20. And in that case, I really don't care about first names so much. I really care about last names and mobile numbers, and only the records which have last names and mobile numbers which match will be considered matching records. So this is all very good. So I've got this threshold, which I've got a potential match, and I've got a 25 score, which is going to be the addition of these particular field weights here. Now, once I decide I have matches, I have to do something with those matches. So I have this merge step. And in this case, I have this default merge strategy, which is going to take the differing values from the properties which don't match in a duplicate scenario, and create arrays for those values and put those in the record. And you'll see exactly what I mean when I actually run this. So now that I've got my matching and merging, scenarios set up, I'm going to run it. Just going to run these steps. And you'll notice that when the step ran, it provided me with a couple of notifications up here. And when I click on these notifications, I'm brought to this match and merge workspace, which is this interactive workspace where I can decide what I want to do with these particular matching records. And I've got obviously I've done this before, so I had another fin record in the system. But you'll notice that the fins that I was looking at before, where I had these coastal emails and these mountaintop emails, those are non-matching properties. And what the merge scenario is going to do is put those properties together in an array so that I have all of the original property, I have all the original values in my merge document. And I have also all of the information I need to go and unmerge the document if I need to. So let's merge this. Let me merge this document, and let's go back and look at our Explore graph. And we see now that we have one fin employee, not two. So if we look at this fin employee, we're going to see that as I mentioned before, we do have arrays of non-matching values where the values didn't match, and where the values did match, they were just carried over as is. Like, for instance, the address, the first name of Adriana and her last name, and we have our profile pic in here. So we still have an image of her that we can verify, yes, that's her, and a number of other of these kinds of values that were non-matching were brought together in arrays. So this is great. This is really cool. But what has happened now is that, well, before I do the unmerging part, I do want to show you one other great thing about the way we're able to use graphs. Remember, the whole point of this is to be able to align Adriana Finn with a new job. She has general ledger skills. Now, if I expand, by control click on this general ledger skill, I get a little pop-up menu that lets me expand the general ledger concept. And what happened there was that under the hood, MarkLogic expanded the query, a semantic query about the general ledger skill set, and pulled in all the related nodes in the graph about general ledger, and gave us a much fuller picture of Finn's place in the organization. So Finn, now we know that Finn has this general ledger product skill, but we also see there's a couple of other job openings that have that general ledger focus. So there's a teacher job opening. Is that a good match for Finn? I don't know. Her resume is an engineering resume, which we can actually even examine here because we pulled in this, we pulled in the full text of the resume, of her resume data. And maybe what it looks like here is that the job opening for senior quality engineer is maybe a really good target for Finn to go for in a search for a new role. So in this way, we can align, we can find the relationships between our business entities, and we can make important business decisions about how to align people because we've got this data that's now what if we had the other fin in the graph? We would have a slightly more confusing situation trying to align her. So that's how mastering has helped us. That's how this graph search has helped us. And I mentioned before that, hey, there might be these issues where we might not necessarily want to have, we might discover that there are two fins, in fact. So what we might do here is unmerge our fin and get back to the state that we were in. And because we've got all this data, which I'm going to show you right here, this is all the raw data in the fin record. So this shows you how the data is represented in a document in MarkLogic's database, and how we've represented and captured all of the data that we use to merge the two fin records together, which we had merged. So, okay, we've got all the URIs and we've got the metadata about the merging. We've got some triples serialized in this document that describe some of the artifacts, the data artifacts that we created that allow us to link all this stuff together. So, so now what we can do is if we're back here on Explorer, we can use all that great data to just provide this little unmerge easy button. So at this point, I'm like, okay, I know that these two fins are different, made a mistake. Now I'm going to unmerge it. And now I'm back to having two fins. And that's essentially, you know, what the mastering and merging I wanted to show you is. One more thing I will tell you is that because of all of our knowledge about the way these data connect, we're able to provide a SQL API. So let's just sort of take a look at, let's just look at this for a second. Let's take off this where clause and let's run this. And so you notice this simple little SQL query that I wrote and I'm running in MarkLogic's query console is now giving me all a tabular view of all the employees that I just entered in there. And I can do queries like you saw, I had the where clause there, and we can get as elaborate as we want. But we've got this view here that we can then visualize in a BI dashboard or whatever else we might need to use SQL and ODBC to connect to. So that's kind of it. And I'm interested now to take some questions if you have them, if that's what we want to do, Phil, or I'm not sure how you envision the next part of this.
Yeah, I mean, there's one question that's just come through on the chat from Suresh, which is if there are two different properties in two different data sets from two different databases, what's the solution there that MarkLogic would employ?
Well, if you have two data sets, right, from two companies' databases, that to me is analogous to the mountaintop data, which we originally brought in, and then all of those coastal data files, which I brought in, which were all of those JSON files. So you would bring those two data sets in, and here on this integrate, in the integrate workflow, you would map each of those data sets to the canonical model, which we created here in our Connect workflow. So that's kind of how we would do that.
And the great thing about MarkLogic is you can see those different properties as you ingest that data, and therefore you can then make your canonical model that will include all the properties of all the data that you have within the DB. Is that right?
Yep, that's correct. And also, one thing I hadn't shown is that we also have this grid view. And remember I showed you the resumes? So I know that somebody went to school in Dublin. Oh, that was Finn. And I'm very interested in taking a look at that. That is the resume of Adriana Finn right there. So I've got also, not only am I indexing all of that property, that property value kind of hierarchical data, I've also just indexed full text, and I can just search on the full text even before I build the structures that that provide us with this sort of thing. So it's very powerful in that sense.
Yeah.
And I think another really interesting thing as well is that when you're talking about merging that data, if you think company A's property is more likely to be correct than company B, you can even choose to weight the data more from one field to another. So if you think of financial data coming in is more accurate to have the bank account correct than if the HR system is, then you can weight that as well with more advanced things.
Absolutely.
And one other thing I just want to mention, when Frank brought up the SQL view there, remember that we're not storing that in a relational table. This is still stored as JSON or XML in MarkLogic. We're just projecting it out as a table. So you've still got all of the flexibility of the multi-model, but you can actually see it as SQL.
Exactly.
Cool. Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you for answering the question, Philip and Frank. So I still have a second question on the same. So actually you mean to say that the kind of a canonical model will have both the properties from both the operational databases. Let's say there are two companies, right? One company acquires another one that goes whatever.
Yeah.
And let's say the acquiring company is in the US, so they have SSN number, and the company is in other country which is having some other thing which is not necessarily SSN number because that is not in the US. So when you build a canonical model, so would you have both the fields?
Yeah, I mean, you're bringing up, I think what I understand your question to have to do with is something I'm showing right here, which is the fact that, with these different systems of record, you wind up with different IDs for the same business entity and different, even different ID schemas, right? So here you can see, here's an employee ID, a merged employee ID, field, which is an array which contains the employee ID values from the different source systems. So those will still be in the record, and as I had shown before, also when you get you've got the ability to take a look at the source documents always. You can preserve them in the staging database, which we've done here, and take a look at them, take a look at the original source. Like, for instance, I could do this, right? I'm sort of interested in this, in what merged here. If I'm doing like my MarkLogic ninja skills, well, these aren't even really ninja skills. I could do this. And
that's a quick interjection. It wouldn't matter though whether they are coming from different systems, right? That's where the weight comes in, right? So if you are putting a weight of 10, for example, on the name, and if they are coming from different systems, then if they have different names, then obviously they're different persons, right? But if they have the same name, that will show up in your margin properties or weight that you actually can find, and you can come over that stuff that you show. So
right. Yeah, and I think the question here as well is, if you've got an SSN number in one record and say it's a UK record in the other system and you don't need an SSN number, maybe you've got a government ID from the UK record as well. So you could model it as government ID and store both properties in there, or you could keep them separate and just have the SSN for now. And when you want to add another government ID, you could create a new property.
Yeah.
But the nice thing as well with MarkLogic is you model as you go. We're storing all of this data as is. And when you're ready, you model it and bring and update it.
In that case, too, you and I use your SSN because you know that the UK doesn't have the SSN, so you won't use it as part of your merging criteria.
Correct. Yeah, I mean, you can take these rules, right? The mastering rules. These matching rules can be custom. They can have logic in them. They can be whatever you need them to be. I showed a simple case where we did a direct out of the box kind of comparison, but you could write this logic and said, well, if this record has Social Security, we're not a Social Security number or a Social Security property. We're gonna use a different matching algorithm for it, for instance.
Yeah, like I think that's survivorship kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and we've also done that for some CDC use cases where you have to wait for all the parts of a record to arrive in the data hub before you start putting it together and creating the view that you need of it, the holistic view.
When I worked for Optum and we implemented MarkLogic and stuff, we had similar use case because we were dealing with patient information, right? So you have, when you move from one company to the next company, you have the same name, you are the same person, but you will have a different patient ID because you actually switching providers or switching different insurance information.
Yes, right.
So those use cases you come across a lot within healthcare.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, guys. So hopefully that's answered your question. If not, please put more questions in the chat and we'll pick those up. We'll have a Q&A session at the end. So if there's anything more you want to ask, please put them in there.
I see a question about data architecture and microservices. And you know, I just want to point out that we're going to cover a lot of that, some of the architecture, a lot of those architectural questions in next session, you know, the next session. So just a plug for the next session.
Absolutely. Well done. Okay. Let me just bring up my screen. Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Frank. That was really good. Okay, what we're now going to do is we're going to hand over to Philip from our customer success team and Pratik, who to discuss how Blue Meteor have utilized MarkLogic and the value that it's bringing to their business. So guys, over to you.
Yeah, hi there. So thanks everyone for joining, especially Pratik for giving us his time today. We were really interested in Blue Meteor's use case because it has a lot of features that are in an MDM solution, but might not necessarily be what people would consider a full MDM solution. And I think that's what most people are looking for when they're looking at an MDM tool. They don't necessarily need it to do 100%, but they need it to do the vast majority and be able to customize, like Frank showed, those steps, those mastering steps along the way to give them the right answers in a flexible and agile manner. So it was really interesting with Blue Meteor's use case. Pratik, you know Blue Meteor better than I, so do you mind introducing yourself and Blue Meteor and on what you guys do?
Sure. Thanks, Philip, and good morning or good afternoon or good evening, wherever you are in the world, joining this meeting over here. So my name is Pratik Chakraborty. I'm the CTO at Blue Meteor, and our company, what we build is a product experience management platform. And I'll talk to you about that in a little bit, about what product experience management is and how it is very similar to the concepts of master data management, but a little different at the same time. So it's a very interesting use case, as you mentioned, and we've built this platform understanding how manufacturers, distributors, and retailers do business or have done business over decades in a brick and mortar scenario where manufacturers build products, they send to distributors and retailers, and they show up in aisles in brick and mortar stores and get sold to the final consumer. So that's the B2C aspect of it, whereas in the B2B aspect of it also, where businesses buy from other businesses, That's also, I mean, if you go back 20 years, 25 years, there was no concept of e-commerce at that time, particularly in B2B. And that's where people, the purchasing officer of a company would actually physically go to a warehouse or see a product, feel a product, and then buy it. But things have changed quite a lot. So with all that background, we came up with this whole concept of product experience management, and that's what we do. That's what we build. Our software is called Amaze, by the way.
Yeah, no. And so, just looking at your solution, what was the business challenges that you use MarkLogic and other tools within your architecture to solve for your customers?
Yeah, sure. So let me elaborate a little bit about the business problem, and that's a very pertinent question. So when you think from how products get from the manufacturer's door to the end consumer, be it a human being consumer or be it another business, there are several aspects to it. So going back to the brick and mortar example, if you take an example of let's say a grocery store or like a Target, Walmart, whatever, okay, Best Buy, those are the brands that are out there in the US. So let's say you go in and you want to buy dairy products. You know that this is the aisle where I can find my cheese and milk, etc. Now, at the same time, if you want to buy a shirt, you can be pretty certain that the shirt is not going to be there in the dairy product section. Or if you go to the apparel, men's apparel section, you are not going to be finding potatoes and onions over there. So the concept of organizing product data has been there for a very long time. That's nothing new. However, with the advent of the e-commerce industry, where people are now buying more and more online, they do not go to a physical store. They do not walk through the aisles to see which aisle has what. They need to be able to figure that out from the website, the e-commerce website itself. And that is the reason product data organization becomes very important. So that leads us to our first business problem, which is the organization and the structure of the catalog or the assortment of products that a retailer / distributor would carry. And that's what in the PXM jargon is called taxonomy structure. So what it really means is organizing the product data in a folder-like structure. For example, if you have just selling shoes, could it be running shoes, soccer shoes, basketball shoes, and also it can be classified as men's shoes and women's shoes. So how do you structure that? So that and many other pieces which are like the attributions, the properties of these products. In a physical store, you go and actually can physically touch a shirt. You can see what the size is. You can feel the linen, whether it's a cotton or silk or whatever. On a website, you have to tell that to the user that this shirt is made with 100% cotton or whatever the case might be. So the next business problem is the accuracy and completeness of the product data, which is what we call SKU, SKU. The stock keeping unit is the atomic level identifier of a product. How do you properly describe a product with all its properties and attributes? And is that description A, accurate, and B, complete? Now, a big problem, if you think about it, my favorite example is if you are the manufacturer of the best TV in the world, you build the best TV in the world, and your TV shows up in different retail websites, but the product detail page on your website is missing the size of the screen size of the TV. You will not even have a single customer, regardless of how best engineering you've done for your TV. Because as a consumer, if I want to buy a TV, I need to know what the size of the TV is. Is it a 50-inch screen or is it a 60-inch screen or whatever? So it's very important that within that data governance section, that's where the product experience comes in, that as a company that sells TVs, you ensure that the screen size is actually a required data attribute. Now, this is a very simple example. There could be much more complex examples. So that is our second business problem, the business problem we solve, where the software allows people to set up these data governance rules, several different kinds of data governance rules that ensure that data is A, complete, and B, accurate. The third thing is what we call digital assets. Now, once again, given the fact that it's an e-commerce world, it's a virtual world, if you want to go and want to buy a piece of furniture, a chair, for example, you really cannot go and sit on that chair in the showroom and feel how it feels. Is it comfortable? Do I have enough room? And so on. So obviously, pictures, videos are very, very important. Where the customer looking at a computer screen or a phone screen is able to get it the full, as much possible, close to the reality of sitting on that chair. So without pictures, videos, product manuals, or supporting documentation, that is a product is very unlikely to sell. So that's the third business problem where we solve, where the MA's platform has a full-fledged digital asset management module, which allows you not just to load pictures and link them to different products, but it goes way beyond that in terms of ensuring that the pictures are correct and how they are, the resolution and blah, 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 et cetera, et cetera. So lots of different things. And last but not the least, one of the biggest problems faced in the industry today is the problem of data syndication. And it's very similar to what Frank was showing just a few minutes ago, where data, so think of a distributor. A distributor is getting product information from different suppliers. There may be tens or 50, hundreds of suppliers supplying data to distributors. Now, a distributor has built its own catalog structure and wants the data to come in a specific format, but all of these different suppliers might not be able to send that information in the exact format with the proper data rules, abiding by the proper data rules to the distributor. So what happens? So the distributor or the retailer has to now employ an army of people who would go through Excel spreadsheets or in many cases, and would you believe it, Access databases, Microsoft Access databases, to go and manually correct that. And when you are dealing with hundreds of thousands of products or millions of products, that becomes a humongously complex and not only a humongously complex task, but retailers take months to bring a new product into into their sales portfolio. And that is the new product introduction process becomes extremely complex and time consuming. So this is not just a problem from the distributor side, but think from the manufacturer side as well. A manufacturer is not selling just through one single channel. They are selling through tens of different distributors and retailers. Now, if that manufacturer is now tasked with sending different formats to all these different sales channels, that's a huge burden on them. They might be great at building, manufacturing ball bearings, but many of these companies don't even have a lot of IT staff or the IT capability to create an automated feed that goes and abides by the rules of each of these channels. So that's where this fourth business problem of data syndication is solved by the MA's platform. And this is one of the places where we use MarkLogic 100% extensively to not only just help the users create those transformation rules, but to also learn from user behavior and put in that machine learning so that new customers or users are not reinventing the wheel. In fact, the recommendations, I'm going to show you some screenshots from our application that basically show what the recommendation engine that comes in. So in a sense, just to summarize, the four business problems that we are solving are the catalog structure or curation, as it's also called, data governance, which essentially means the completeness and correctness of product data, the digital asset management, which is pictures, videos, and the third one is the data syndication problem. These are the main four problems which are solving, which pretty much covers the gamut of the whole thing.
Okay. And yeah, I mean, I know because I've come from that world. It is even only a few years ago was very manual task and quite labor intensive. So I can imagine a system like this. Well, I certainly would have snapped it up back in my day, because I had a team of probably 10 plus people working for me doing that. What does your system, what does it look like, and where does MarkLogic fit in within your system's sort of journey, the data journey that that information goes on? It'd be interesting to see that.
So when we, as a company, decided to build this product, the first problem we tackled was the fourth problem that I mentioned, which is the data syndication problem, because that is probably the most pressing need that we figured out. So that's where we use MarkLogic completely as the backend database with Java business layer and Angular frontend, if you're asking for the technology stack that we use. So that's what we started off with, because the whole concept of transformation rules, taking a catalog, which is what we call a source catalog, and transforming that into a target catalog, is nothing but creating transformation rules. And this is where I think the power of MarkLogic and the power of a NoSQL database in particular helps us a lot, because as Frank was also showing, I was hearing Frank's presentation and seeing there's a lot of similarities. This is where, if you think about purely from an MDM concept, the concept of multiple data sources feeding in to build one single item, in this case, item being a product or a SKU, that transformation rule, the whole concept of survivability, the whole concept of, if I have multiple sources sending me the same data, how do I prioritize? It's all inbuilt, and that is where MarkLogic is used. I mean, I can just quickly share a screen where I'll just show you the basic architecture diagram that we have. It's fairly simple from a high level. As you can see, we are hosting our entire technology stack in Amazon Web Services. And we have these forests. We do not use MarkLogic collections because we wanted to get the full flexibility. So there is no concept of collections whatsoever. All these different entities and their relationships are sort of inbuilt and handled by different IDs, and the code enforces that. And that's why we have this tree replica with the forests in AWS for MarkLogic. Now, when we installed MarkLogic several years ago in AWS did not have their native MarkLogic offering. Like, for example, if you want to set up an Oracle database on AWS, or AWS has their own Oracle specific RDS. Now, I know AWS has MarkLogic specific stuff now, but we were way early than AWS to even recognize that MarkLogic fits our needs. So we host these on EC2 instances, by the way, just for anybody who is technically oriented and wants to know about this. So this is the bridge application, which is the data syndication application. Yeah. The other place where we also use MarkLogic was something that we built in the recent past, which is the Amaze intelligence piece. Now, over the past several years, we have amassed a lot of catalog structures and a lot of different products, right, across different verticals. So we use that for building, I wouldn't even call it a data warehouse. It's more of a data repository and intelligence data repository. It goes through a pipeline of refinement and removing of intellectual property and everything, deduplication, de-identification of data, all of that stuff. And then it feeds into a very, very robust recommendation engine and a search engine. So I'll talk a little bit more about that later on, but that's the other piece where MarkLogic comes into the picture very, very prominently.
Yeah, and you mentioned, what's the sort of value that MarkLogic brings back to your business? Is it that agility? Is it the being able to store data as is, like you say, with large binary files included, or are you looking now at the sort of more advanced features within MarkLogic, the powerful search capabilities and things like that to improve on what you've currently got?
Yeah, I think search capabilities is a huge thing. I mean, we use the full gamut of full text searching with stemming. We use with a thesaurus that ensures that we are storing the custom dictionaries essentially. I mean, that's a fantastic feature of MarkLogic which we use. Then there's also this concept of proximity boosting, where I mean, again, I don't know how much more technical you want me to go to. Essentially, the concept of contexts. So let me give you an example of what a context means. So, say for example, you want to look at a product called shoe, right? Now, when you and I hear about the word shoe, we think of something that we wear, where our foot goes into it, right? But in an engineering, in an industrial world, a shoe could mean something else. It's a mechanical engineering term, which means that it's basically a sort of a fitting that is used in different mechanical jigs and stuff like that. So that could be a shoe. A shoe could be something that is used in farming for horses. I mean, these are things. So the same word can mean several different things based upon context.
I think that was Frank's when he was talking about the double metaphone. You know, looking at the language around the thing and different meanings and things like that. So yeah, no, I get that. Yeah.
Exactly. So if a customer who is in an industrial engineering realm is searching for a shoe, what I do not want to do is show him ladies' shoes or men's dress shoes, because that is probably irrelevant for him. I mean, technically it would still be right, but logically, business perspective-wise, it means nothing to him. So similarly, if a consumer goods customer is searching for shoes, I wouldn't want to show him horseshoes or shoes for jigs, and I would want to show him the actual human being shoes. So figuring out context is very, very important in the arena of searchability and results coming out of that search. So that's where we build this context and store those within the MarkLogic database itself, so that searches are very contextual in nature. So that's a very important point in that, where we use the power of MarkLogic.
You're trying to say that guys should not buy shoes for their wives, huh?
So
yes.
So where do you see the roadmap for Blue Meteor and your products, and where does MarkLogic fit in with that discussion?
To be absolutely honest with you, there are still several features of MarkLogic that we still do not use. And MarkLogic has a lot of different features in the advanced search capabilities, where you have these different language support, for example. That is one area where our application still needs to grow. Although we have international customers, and we are not facing the problem hugely at this point, but I'll tell you, even with our Canadian customers, there is a difference. The way color is spelled in the US versus the way color is spelled in the Queen's language is different, right? Yeah. So that is where it sometimes becomes a little problematic, because we do not have multi-language support. That's one thing that we want to explore. Then, again, we would want to also explore the concept of snippeting, where we have certain documents in MarkLogic which are huge. We store the data as XML. We don't store it as JSON at this time. And in many cases, all we need are 2 data elements, but in many cases, we are sometimes bringing in the entire document or documents, which causes a huge problem in terms of memory usage, and sometimes the infamous expanded free cache error that we sometimes get. So there are different ways we have to tune and use the concept of snippeting, and maybe also do things in loops and stuff like that. And MarkLogic does provide those. It's quite beautiful to see what are the different aspects of MarkLogic that we do not use. And the reason why I say it's beautiful is because we know there's so much more that we can achieve. We have not reached the zenith of using the entire MarkLogic set of features, frankly speaking.
Well, Pratik, thank you very much for that. It's been really interesting to learn more about what you guys are doing, and like I say, looking forward in the future, you still think you've got a long way to go, which is really good, because like I say, these products need to adapt and change as everybody else does. If you've got any questions for Pratik, please feel free to put them in the chat window, and we'll make sure that either we can answer them today or on here. Thank you so much for your time. Like I say, it's been really interesting learning and getting more detail on your use case. Yeah, thanks again for joining us today.
You're welcome.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, guys. That was really interesting. Before we hear from our next speaker, we just want to draw your attention to the survey that we're bringing up shortly. We really would appreciate it if you could just take a couple of minutes. Just take a couple of minutes to look through that for us and respond. It really helps to focus what we do with these sessions. This session itself was a feedback from one of these polls. So please do take the time to fill that in for us, and we really appreciate it. Okay, next, I'm really pleased to hand over to Francois from Sopra Steria. I don't think they need any introduction. They're one of the largest consultancy and software development houses out there. Francois is going to take us through some of the lessons learned from their hands-on experience of delivering MDM to their customers. So over to you. Thank you so much.
Hello. Let me show you my screen. I can't share because...
oh, James, you need to stop sharing there, yeah.
Thank you.
I'm just trying to find my mouse again. Okay. All yours.
Do you see my screen? It's okay?
Yes. Looks good.
Good.
Hello, everybody. I'm François Penaud. I'm French, so I will speak slowly. I hope you will understand me. I have been working for Sopra Steria for 15 years. I'm a software architect. I started working with MarkLogic in 2017, and I'm today a MarkLogic leader for Sopra Steria. So, which is Sopra Steria? Sopra Steria is a French global SI. It's one of the European leaders in computer services. Today, Sopra Steria has more than 45,000 employees in more than 20 countries. I work for the business unit Insurance and Social Protection. Between 2017 and today, we won multiple projects for insurance and social protection customers, including MDM, product, person, contract. You can see on this slide our projects. We have developed projects and POV, proof of value. We also realized architecture and code reviews for different customers. So we developed many applications with MarkLogic. We even created a MarkLogic Center of Competencies in 2018. The targets of this COC were to describe the best practices, to train and certify people, share and capitalize our experiences, and industrialize around the MarkLogic solution. Continuous integration, continuous deployment, information system integration. Today we have around 30 people in the COC, including 7 certified people. So you can see we know MarkLogic pretty well, and that's why I'm here today. Indeed, the title of my presentation is Lessons Learned from Multiple Projects. I will focus my presentation on these following elements. First, aware MarkLogic approach, then definition of business use cases, then agility of MarkLogic platform, and data exposure. With our rich experience, let me present you the MarkLogic approach, our MarkLogic approach. It will help you to understand the presentation. Here you can see a good illustration of the MarkLogic iterative approach. And this is how we work at Sopra Steria with MarkLogic. And this is how we think you have to proceed to build an MDM project with MarkLogic. First, you load data as is. Many file formats are allowed. Most of the time, we use CSV files corresponding to a database, one file by a SQL table. MarkLogic can help you if you don't know pretty well your input data. During this step, you can ingest data, and after that, you can do data mining on it. It's very interesting. This is, you can see on the picture number 2. Indeed, whole data is indexed in MarkLogic, so you can use the universal index, the Google search bar, and facets to do data mining. It's necessary to know your source data in order to make your mapping, to harmonize data to a target business model. This is the third step on picture 3. You configure mapping and you launch an harmonization. After that, you can check your harmonized data. An harmonization is a transformation of the source data into the data in the format of the target model, the business model. The uses of facets helps you to check harmonization. If the harmonized data is wrong, you iterate over and over. And when the harmonization is good, you can expose the data. That is the strength of this approach. You can iterate over and over until your mapping is good. Then we talk about the definition of use cases. This is the first lesson. You must think about business use cases before starting application development. This lesson is not specific for MDM projects. It concerns all types of MarkLogic projects, such as document management, maybe. Indeed, MarkLogic does not respond to one specific need, but many needs. If you want to build an MDM with MarkLogic, you will need to develop, I'm talking about code, some features. Even if MarkLogic provides many powerful APIs and tools such as a Data Hub Framework or Data Hub Central, you saw a few minutes ago, it will be necessary to develop something. All the features are not out of the box, unlike native MDM products, but it's a strength. You can develop the feature you want, and you can develop it very quickly. But you have to think first what you really want to do. You must start an MDM project with a use case in mind, at least a draft version. The use case can change during the project, of course. It's a strength of MarkLogic, but you have to have the main idea in mind from start. That's my advice. So also you don't have to try to reproduce all features, all MDM features that of a MDM product, for example. It's a mistake not to make. I know that because one of my customers made it at the beginning of MarkLogic MDM project. It was an agile project, and our customer wanted us to develop merge and purge features in the second sprint. We developed both features, but they became obsolete a few sprints later. The business need was not clear at that moment, and the business model then changed. So it generated rewards, time, and money. That's why it's very important to develop feature iteratively in a consistent order. And that's why an agile approach is a good thing for MarkLogic project. For example, is the purge feature important to business? No. Okay, we won't develop this feature. Is the purge feature important to business? Yes, it is. It's very important. Okay, we will develop it, but only when data is harmonized. Now, let me talk to you about the agility of the platform. According to me, this is the biggest asset of MarkLogic. Indeed, it's better to be agile when you build an MDM project. Usually, 1 in 2 MDM projects fails for multiple reasons. business use cases are not identified at the beginning. You build the MDM first, and after that, you think what you can do. I already explained that. At one customer, it has in mind from start to build an MDM person and then a 360-degree view. This customer knows from start what the MDM project will be useful to. In this case, being the main source of the 360-degree view. Lack of knowledge of source data. Specification documents are not always up to date with project, and it's difficult when you don't have a specification. You have to explore data, and sometimes it's difficult to explore data, and it takes much time to do that, even more for all systems. In the domain of social protection, many companies have merged in recent years. After several consecutive merges, companies have to maintain many applications, and some of them may be old. At a customer, we had an old COBOL DB2 application, and it was not possible to export data easily. But MarkLogic helps us to do that. It's a strength of MarkLogic. Third point, the model sometimes is imposed by the MDM tool. For MDM product, you use the product, and there is a model imposed. And often at a customer, the model is very specific. And MarkLogic does not impose a model. You can model your entities as you want. At Sopra Steria, at one of our customers in the field of health, it allows us to use a simple person model with only 5 entities. It was enough for our need, and it goes fast to harmonize data. It's a strength of MarkLogic. The last point is for me the most important. Each modification of mapping, for example, takes much time to be tested. If you change your mapping, you have to test it, but before that, you have to package and deploy a new version of your application, and the process can take several days. So every mistake costs time and money, and it's impossible not to make mistakes in MDM project. If you tell me it's possible to make directly the correct model and to describe the correct mapping, I will answer you, you are a liar. Whether relation modelization or not relational modelization, you never build the correct model the first time. I never see that. You have to iterate over and over until the model is good. And this is why MDM IT projects are expensive. MarkLogic product can help you because the agile approach allows you to make mistakes and to correct them quickly. Now, let me present you 2 elements that improve productivity and quality of MarkLogic projects, in my opinion. They are not mandatory, but I advise to put them in place at the beginning of the project or gradually, and therefore you will save time. I advise to configure an industrialized environment as soon as possible. Today, in IT project, continuous integration and continuous delivery are 2 concepts very important. It's even more true for me for MarkLogic projects. MarkLogic provides a component that allows you to deploy MarkLogic configuration automatically. It's MarkLogic Gradle. So you can easily build and deploy your MarkLogic configuration. It's not difficult to automate packaging and deployments in tools such as Jenkins, GitLab CI, XL Deploy, tools very used by our customers. At Sopra Steria, we did it at all our customers. I think it's also necessary to automate the execution of the batches. It takes a lot of time to deploy new mappings and even more to launch treatments of harmonization. Sometimes you will even have to ask someone from another department to launch the treatment. If deploying a new version of your application is just a click button, you will save many days. If launching an harmonization is just a click button, you will save many hours or days. My advice is to invest time and to industrialize. As I said, it will save a lot of time afterwards. It will avoid many tasks, manual tasks, and tasks which are uninteresting and which take a lot of time. So automate everything you can. Automate packaging, automate deployments in different environments, from integration to production, automate launches of treatments. In addition to industrialization, the dataset part is for me very important. You have to work on a small but consistent samples of data. When I say small, I'm talking about a volume of 100,000 of elements maximum. The sample must not be too small to validate the performance of your treatment. What I want to make you understand that is better to avoid using all the data. The full approach must be avoided when it's possible. With a small data set, treatments will last a few hours each time. So imagine if you have to launch many harmonization each day, you will have to wait again and again. With some of my customers, this is the case. We don't have a small data set, but full data set, millions of data. So an harmonization lasts a few hours. So we must wait until the next day to have an answer to our correction. It can be frustrating. It is actually. Without a consistent dataset, you will find special cases late in production. Worse, it even happens to me to believe the mapping of a field was good because 100% of my sample was correct. After delivery, I found that 90% of the harmonized data was wrong. In fact, my sample was not consistent and only contained special cases. It's hard to build a consistent dataset, but the more consistent it will be, the better the project will go. You will find bugs earlier with a constant dataset, and it will cost less to fix these bugs. So create a small consistent dataset if you can. But important say, if you can't, MarkLogic allows you to make mistakes, so you will succeed. But it will take longer. Before talking about data exposure, let me tell you about 3 more lessons. First, listen to build progressively your project based on 2 axes, sources and business model. Agile methods correspond well to MarkLogic project. I say that. If your business model is simple, it's rare, but it can be possible. My advice is to model all your model first during the first sprint, and then to harmonize new sources during each following sprint. If your business model is complex, model it progressively. Model a few entities during each sprint and harmonize sources then. During the following sprint, you will add 2 or 3 new entities and enrich mapping of existing sources. Do not harmonize too many sources during the same sprint, because an update of the model will impact all your mappings. My advice is to validate each update on the model on 1 or 2 sources only. And when it's good, you update all mappings. Model the whole model directly is not a good approach for me, according to me, sorry. As I said before, it's impossible to create the right model the first time. So I saw that at a customer which wanted to validate all the model first. In the end, the model was very different, and all reworks cost a lot of time and money. You have to respect the iterative approach to guarantee the success of your project. I repeat myself, but the possibility of making mistakes and correcting them quickly is a great privilege for an IT project. Next lesson is make things simple. Do not try to implement all MDM features. The example of the merge feature is interesting. It's an important feature of MDM project. At a customer, we have developed the feature by integrating weight management based on criteria, notion of priorities by freshness and source, as well as a threshold to make it possible to differentiate between an automatic merge and the creation of a manual task of suspicion. It was complex, too complex for the initial need. And finally, we realized, that one of the criteria was not often filled in the input data. So the consequence was we had more than 1 million of human tasks created in a task bin, which is impossible to be treated by humans, or so in many hundreds of years. That's why you have to develop a simple functionality first and enrich it again and again. Make simple and enrich after that. Do not try to develop the whole big complex feature the first time. The third lesson is build a MarkLogic application like you build a custom development. A MarkLogic project is an IT project. I have talked a lot about the build phase of a project, but you have to think about the maintenance phase from the start. Indeed, because you sometimes modify model and mappings, you must protect yourselves from regression. A developer error can happen. All developers make mistakes. So, example, the modification of a mapping. At Sopra Steria, we realized we need to develop automatic test from the beginning, and because there are many bugs on the mappings, so sorry, I have a problem. Do you hear me? Do you hear me? Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I said a developer error can happen. So we all know that the later a bug is discovered, the more it costs. That's why we have developed automatic integration tests around the solution in order to detect regression before delivery. For us, for me, it's essential to guarantee the success of the project and its maintenance. Data exposure. One of the strengths of MarkLogic is that you don't need to duplicate the data in different formats. You can expose it in different formats. This is a multi-model approach, as you saw at the beginning of the presentation. So I advise you to define the mockups of the screens and the content of your own REST APIs from start of the project. Why? Because it will be quick to develop implementation, such as a custom API or specific file extraction after the data is harmonized. Transforming data before exposing it with MarkLogic, it's a thing to do. So when you will create or modify an API, it will go fast. Of course, if your service contains many business rules, it won't be easy. But globally, all services, all custom services you develop with MarkLogic are quite simple. My conclusion is using MarkLogic does not guarantee the success of an MDM project, but the fact MarkLogic promotes an agile approach, the success of your project will be guaranteed. You can do mistakes, and that's why it's very interesting. And MarkLogic is a powerful tool to build an MDM project. At Sopra Steria, we have developed many MDM projects, and it works. It goes fast and it works. So voilà, it's my conclusion of my presentation. Sorry for my English.
That was fantastic. Thank you so much.
I thought your English was very good.
Absolutely. Yeah, nothing to apologize for. Certainly better than my French. So,
merci, François.
Yeah, merci indeed. Okay, great. Thank you very much. Let me just share my screen for the last piece. Wonderful. Okay, before we get to the Q&A session and any outstanding questions, I just wanted to thank all of the speakers today. I really hope they've inspired you to want to hear more from MarkLogic. For those of you that are new to the platform, or for those existing customers that are on the call, that these are new use cases that may be useful and interesting to you to use with your licensing. Our first demo from Frank showed the power of the data hub and smart mastering, and we really hope that inspired you to take a deeper look. But if it didn't, and that discussion with Pratik, should have raised some more interest. He explained how MarkLogic's the key data layer behind their platform, and gave them that flexibility to bring all of those multiple data sources together and harmonize into their canonical model. And it was great to hear that he's got more features in his roadmap, that he's going to continue to use MarkLogic to improve their product and their processes. And finally, again, thanks to Francois. It's great to hear real world examples of implementing MarkLogic. And Sopra Steria is one of our key delivery partners around the world. And I think the key message I took from that is that you need to stay agile if you want to be successful. And hopefully MarkLogic gives you a lot of the tools to remain agile and not to enforce those data models and approaches on you, so you can do things the way that your business demands them. Please remember to sign up for the technical deep dive session next week. You'll hear from Gary from MarkLogic about some other real world examples of using semantic features of MarkLogic combined with smart mastering to deliver some amazing results. MuleSoft will be going through a deeper dive on their technology and implementing their API first approach. And Frank's doing another session on architectural approaches. So some really interesting stuff coming up for those that are technical amongst you. And if you want to hear from the first week, then we touched on some more higher level concepts and approaches with MarkLogic and implementing the MDM features. So with that, I will open the floor up for any questions that anybody has. Phil, do we have anything left in the chat that we haven't addressed yet?
Yeah, we've just had one, and I think it's an interesting question from Suresh. It's who are the MarkLogic users? And I would say historically, developers and engineers, architects, people of a technical background. But as you've seen, as we've abstracted the product, as we've made it easier to access with low-code solutions like Frank was showing you there with the Data Hub platform, more and more we're trying to move that towards the business user as well. And so that business and IT can be aligned so that changes can be made to a project quickly and efficiently. And that's what we would really argue is, bringing the business to the technology, I think is just as important as having the technology brought to the business, and those working together. I think you see those successful projects time and time again, and it's because they're so aligned. And like I say, with the data platform, it's now even easier to master your data and to really get to the business questions that you're trying to answer with the technology. So.
Yeah, I can actually circle on that as well with my implementation of MarkLogic in the past, and a project I'm actually gearing to work on. We trying to implement MarkLogic with one of my clients as well. What I think is actually missing within most of the other implementation, the folks are actually missing the data conversation, right? There's too much focus on the engineering aspect of data, and that actually drives the business into a different room. With the implementation of MarkLogic, we can bring both parties into the same room and have complete data conversation. And that actually brings a lot of stuff into perspective when you're talking about MDM programs, you're talking about data quality, and you're talking about cross-utilization of data domains across the organization. So that's a very good perspective.
Great, thank you. Anyone else have any questions they'd like to either come off mute and talk about or put in the chat? No? Okay. Well, if you're interested in getting the recording from today, if we have your email address, if you signed up through the registration form, we'll send that on to you. If not, please do put your email address if you come directly on the link in here, so we can send that on to you. And we will look forward to seeing you next week. And thank you all very much for attending.
Thanks, guys. This was great. Thank you. Appreciate it.
No worries. Thank you.
Yeah.
Great, you got that, Phil. I'll
yeah, I've got
leave
all
the
of this
session. Wonderful.
I'll just,
Thanks, everyone.
recording.